Here for the Make $10 billion in 1 month with no effort panel. I think we're... Oh no, all right, that's right. No, that's not true or real. Instead, we're combating burnout, because that's what the life of a real indie writer is like, is constantly struggling not to quit. I'm James Hunter. I've been writing and doing this full-time for about 9 years. I've written 40-ish books in that time. I also run with my wife here, Shadow Alley Press. We're a publisher that predominantly focuses on LitRPG and progression fantasy. We have about 250 titles out across Shadow Alley Press. And burnout is the thing that is the specter that haunts us all the time as indie authors. When I'm at these conventions, I hear people talking about like, oh man, I'm really close to burnout. Every conversation I have with an author, we talk about burnout, but we never really get into the nitty gritty of like what burnout is, what do we do about it. It's just kind of like, oh, I'm gonna take a day off and then I'm just gonna get back to it and that'll be fine. It will not be fine. That is not the solution. So let me scroll down here. Welcome to the Pain Olympics. This is the reality of being a career indie author. It's the Pain Olympics. I like this quote from Stephen Pressfield. He says, "The artist committing himself to his calling has volunteered for hell, whether he knows it or not." And I don't want to be bleak, but I mean, that's a big part of it, right? As someone who's been doing this for 9 years, I can tell you the number of faces, reoccurring faces that I've seen since the beginning has drastically dwindled. Jeanette and I, 2 days ago, I think they were doing a group photo of all of the authors that are still here that were at the original 20 Books to 50K convention back in 2017. I think there were 18 of us. That's not to say that some of the people that are still around just aren't here, but that's a small fraction of the attendance-ship that we had in 17 is still here, still doing this. I have lots of friends that they just vanish and you don't see them anymore. And the longer you do this, the more and more you see people just kind of drift away. It's just the thing that is kind of there. We don't talk about it. It's the elephant in the room, and that elephant is on fire. It's an epidemic. I always say that if you make it 5 years, like really doing this for 5 years, not like, oh yeah, I've been writing my one book for 5 years and I go to occasional cons, like, yeah, but if you're really doing this, if you're pursuing this as a career or with the intentionality of I want to make this a career, and you make it 5 years, you're a veteran in this industry. Which is not true for almost any other industry. Any other industry, if you make it 5 years, you're barely above a toddler in that industry. But here, you are a hardened veteran of 1,000 battles if you made it 5 years as an indie author. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I've listed a couple here. One, production goals. Like the minimum number of books that we are expected to produce every year, if you want to make a career out of this, is 3. And that's the minimum. Realistically, it's probably going to be 4. You're looking at 1 book a quarter. There are genres that demand 1 book a month. We all know what those genres are. That's right, reverse whale harem. That's the genre, 1 book a month minimum if you want to have a break-in. And so we have these really, really, really high production goals that we have to meet if we want to be able to do it. We also have unrealistic expectations about what success looks like. And I love 20 Books. We've been to every 20 Books since the beginning of 20 Books. And 20 Books provides a deluge of wonderful, useful information, but it also skews expectations on what success looks like. Because most of the people that are presenting are people that have this survivorship bias, and they have, they're multi-6 or 7-figure authors. They've been doing this a long time. And so we see that and we mirror that and we think that's what success looks like. And it gives a lot of us unrealistic expectations on an unrealistic timeline. And that is one of the key components that will lead to eventual burnout. We'll get to that a little bit more later. The other thing about being an indie author is that we have one head and 1,000 hats that we have to wear all the time. You are not just a writer. You're an art director, and you're a marketer, and you're a PR person, and you're a networker. And a lot of us are like introverts who don't even like people. That's why we want to be writers. And you have to come to these things and talk to people and go on camera and live stream. And I'm on TikTok doing dances. What is happening to the world that I, a 37-year-old man, have to dance? What is going on? That's the life of an indie author. There are a lot of expectations and a lot of different roles that we have to fill. And then there's this other weird piece called work-life balance. I'm sure you've all heard of life before. It might be a foreign concept to some of us if you've been doing this for a little while. A lot of us, especially in the beginning, when we're doing this, we're trying to do this while also holding down a full-time job, having relationships and responsibilities or kids or school or other functions, or like trying not to balloon up because we don't ever go anywhere or do anything. Like my morning routine is I wake up and I roll down my stairs, I worm my way into the office, and then I don't have to move again at all if I don't want to for the rest of the day. And I can go weeks without moving. I mean, so that's like, it's hard to keep all of these things in balance, and all of those things contribute to burnout. There's also this thing that I like to call, my buddy Aaron and I like to call, accelerated author time. As an indie author, what you are essentially trying to do is cram a 30-year career into like 3 or 4 years, because that's what we do. I have 40 books out. You know who else has 40 books out? Jim Butcher, who's been doing this for 25 years, right? So a lot of us are trying to compress years worth of writing down into a very short span of time. And the thing about 30-year career authors, they burn out too. So it's no wonder that the 3-year mark is the tipping point for a lot of indies, where a lot of them just vanish and you don't hear from them again. You might expect that it's the people that are not successful that are going to be the most likely to burn out because they're not reaping the reward of their work, and that's part of it. But actually, it's the ones who are successful who are more likely to burn out, because the things that you have to do initially to achieve that success, it's so much work over such in a short, accelerated period of time that it exhausts you to the core. And you just wake up one day and you think, if I have to write one more word, I will die, right? And that's where a lot of us get. So I know, but this is hard. I know, it's hard. We're going to talk about solutions. So first, let's talk about what burnout is. There are 3 components that actually contribute to burnout. So when we talk about burnout, why, yes, I do feel dead inside. Why do you ask? That's my face all the time. There are 3 components. When we talk about burnout, I hear it a lot again at these conventions, but there's not always a good definition of what that is. So burnout is actually a evil cocktail consisting of 3 components. The first one is exhaustion, and this fatigue presents itself both as mental and physical. It's just, you're tired all the time. The energy that you normally have is just, it's zapped by chronic, persistent exhaustion. If you are a parent and you're working and you're balancing and you're trying to advertise in social media and you're also waking up at 3:30 in the morning to write, the exhaustion just sets in and it's hard to break out of that. So that's a big part of it. The second component is cynicism. And there's a reason why sort of the jaded, bitter writer is a stereotype, and that's because it's true. A lot of us get really jaded and really bitter, and the longer you do it, it's easy to get jaded and bitter and cynical and think, it doesn't matter how long or how hard I work, this is not going to work. I'm going to fail, this is not worth it. We get bitter about the success of other people. We get bitter about, why did they get that deal? I'm just as good of a writer. Why did that happen to them but not to me? I'm working so hard. Or it can present as apathy, where we just don't care anymore. Like, I'm doing this, but what does it really matter? It's not going to go anywhere. All of those things are components to this cynicism, which is kind of this creeping rot that just works its way and insinuates its way into your life. And the last one is lack of accomplishment. So every year, we're almost at December, which means it's time for me to make New Year's resolutions. And my New Year's resolution has always been, for the past 20 years, to go to the gym and get in shape and lose weight. It has never worked in all of the times that I've done it. And part of it is because I'll make this plan, and then I'll go and I'll be really diligent, and I'll eat right, and I'll track calories for 6 months, and I will not get the results that I want. And then I think, why? I'm putting in all of this effort, I'm doing all of the right things, and it's not yielding the type of results that I think I should look like Brad Pitt. Why don't I look like Brad Pitt? I mean, genetics, obviously, but in my mind, I'm thinking I'm doing the right things. I should get the reward for doing the right things. And that doesn't always happen. And so when you have those 3 things combined, it's like Captain America or Captain Planet. You remember, fire, earth, wind, Captain Planet. But it's cynicism and lack of personal accomplishment and exhaustion. When you combine all of those things, Captain Burnout comes and wrecks your life and flips over your table and then sets your garage on fire. So that's what we're dealing with. I want to be clear about what burnout is not. All right, because this is really important, because these things can sometimes mirror the effects of burnout, but these are not burnout. The first one is stress. Stress is not fun, no one likes it, but stress is normal. Most of us have a certain amount and a certain degree of stress in our lives, And although long-term chronic stress can contribute to burnout, stress itself is not burnout. Stress, when you're thinking about stress, think about it as having too many things on your plate. Like, man, I have too many things on my plate. I'm juggling too many things. I can't keep up with all of the stuff that I have to do. That's stress. Burnout is, I have so many things on my plate and I don't care. I can smash the plate or I can walk away from the plate. Literally nothing about the things on my plate motivate me to do anything. That's when we're talking about burnout. The second part is depression. Now again, depression and burnout often get conflated and confused because the symptoms of burnout and the symptoms of depression are often the same. The difference is that burnout usually only affects your work life. So if you feel like you're not motivated, you don't care, you have apathy, you have cynicism, but it's only revolving around your work, then that's probably burnout. If it's other things like, I am not motivated to play video games, or I don't want to spend time with my family, or I can't motivate myself to get out of bed, that's probably not burnout, that's probably depression, and you should go get help, okay? And the last one is poor self-esteem. A lot of us, not all of us, but like I would say like 95% of writers, I say not all of us because I'm looking at Seb, who has never struggled with imposter syndrome a day in his life. He thinks he is God's gift to writing. And the problem is he is a good writer, so it's partially justified. But most of us struggle with poor self-esteem, and we think my work's not good. I don't know what I'm doing. I have a pin on, again, I've been doing this for 9 years that says I don't know what I'm doing. And feelings of low self-worth can contribute to burnout long-term, especially when we start talking about things like comparing your career to others. But again, poor self-esteem is not necessarily burnout. That's just a thing that long-term can lead to burnout. All right, so now we know what it is, we know what it's not. What do we do about it? Because I want to see all of you here again next year and the year after that, and I want all of you to be wealthy and fabulously happy, because I'm lonely and I need friends. And if you all go away, then I have to make new friends, and I'm bad at meeting people. So I need you guys to figure this out so that we can all like go on this journey together. So I got a little quote here: sow a thought, reap an action; sow an action, reap a habit; sow a habit, reap a character; sow a character, reap a destiny. And we're going to talk a lot about habits because unfortunately there's not like a quick, easy fix for a lot of these things. A lot of it's mindset shifts. It's also about developing new habits and avoiding some old ones. So we're going to talk about 3 habits that you need to avoid: the mindset of more, the motivation bubble, and comparatitis. And we're going to talk about 2 things that you need to start doing immediately. And that's that you need to treat this like a job, and you need to establish healthy priorities. Healthy priorities. We'll talk a lot more about that because y'all are bad at it. I'm bad at it. We're all bad at it. All right, so let's go over the things to avoid. The first thing we're going to talk about is the mindset of more. We must do our work for its own sake, not for the fortune or the attention or the applause. That is a really important truth, and it's really hard to get around that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But the question I want to ask is, will more make you happy? Lots of people, probably a lot of people in this room, seem to think that yes, more will make you happy. The truth is it probably will not, to a degree. Now certainly money has the ability to make some problems go away. And there was a pretty comprehensive study done back in 2018 that followed about 2 million people. And they found that yes, annual income does help, but once it hits a certain point, about $95,000, there are no significant additional gains in happiness or fulfillment after that threshold. So yes, money will make you happy up to a point. Success and accomplishment will make you happy up to a point, but then it doesn't really anymore. But the problem is that our brains are hardwired to chase that, right? Because we're unhappy and we get to that $95,000 and things get better and we think, well, okay, so it was bad and then it got better. So if I just keep doing more of that, it's going to get better and better and better and better and better. But that's not the way that it works. There's a really prominent productivity consultant. His name is Chris Bailey, and he works with uber successful people with net worths of hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. And the first question he asks them when he starts working with them is, are you happy? And the answer is no. They are all absolutely miserable people. They hate life, they live in fear. All of those things are true, and they're constantly pursuing more. Even though they have more resources than they could ever possibly expend in all of their lifetimes, they're still not happy and they want more. And it's a terrible mindset that will cripple you long term. And a lot of indie authors get into this too, because it's not just about money. We get future fixated, which is a recipe for chronic anxiety. Confucius said, if you are depressed, you are living in the past, and if you're anxious, you're living in the future. We are constantly, as indie authors, projecting into the future. I'm constantly thinking about the next project that I'm going to do, the next series that I'm going to do, the next release that I'm going to do. And the reality is that over time, this spirals into increasingly unrealistic scenarios, and it creates chronic long-term stress that actually prevents you from being productive in the here and now, because you are always future focused. You're always thinking, well, once I get this book done, I will be happy. But you will not be happy, because you're going to have to write the next book. Again, I have written 40 books. Aaron Michael Ritchie right here, 73 books. Being an indie author is like being on a hamster wheel that never ends, and you think it's going to end, but then it doesn't. And then you finish the book, you're like, now it's time to get off the hamster wheel, but then you just start doing the thing again. And so what happens is, because we're on this constant wheel of always being focused on the future, the next project, the next deal, we never live in the moment, and we constantly create this chronic stress for ourselves that it's really, sorry guys. Got a little scroll happy there. So it's very, very difficult to move away from that and to find a way to be happy in the here and now, and that's really the answer. So the cure to anxiety, if there was an opposite of anxious, it's calm. So Confucius also said, if you're depressed, you're living in the past. If you're anxious, you're living in the future. And if you are at peace, you are living in the present. I believe that satisfaction, happiness, and productivity, they all intertwine in the same way that cocktail of evil that will burn down your garage of burnout, you need all of these things to exist. You need gratitude and you need peace in the moment to be able to actually be happy in your circumstances. My wife and I talk about this all the time.
What's the cocktail for happiness? Gratitude and peace?
Gratitude, celebration is also another one, but gratitude, celebration, and peace. That's the cocktail for long-term happiness. My wife and I talk about this a lot. We go on lavish, extravagant vacations. We went to Madrid. We went to Valencia the year before. We went to Bali. We've gone all over places. Our lives are spectacular. But you know what? That's not actually our life, right? Those are little snippets of our life, and we think that's what our life is. That's what all of us are grinding for, thinking, oh man, if I could only go to the Madrid thing, I'd be happy. You won't be, because that's not your life. Your life is the stuff that you do every single day. If you find yourself repeating a habit and an action every single day, that's your life. Putting your kids to bed, that's your life. Cooking dinner, that's your life. Spending 3 hours in a chair writing words, that's your life. The release is not your life, because maybe you're going to have 3 of those a year. 3 days out of the year, you're going to have a release. The rest of the time is your life. Those things are aberrations on your life. So when you're only looking at the aberrations and you're thinking, if I could only get this thing or this thing or this thing, you're living for 2 weeks out of the year. You need to find a way to be able to live every single day and enjoy every single day. And the way you do that is by finding joy in the work. And that's something that I had to come back to. I struggle with that. I have tiptoed on the edge of burnout so many times I can't tell you. And the answer has always been, find a way for me to enjoy the work. Not the satisfaction of having written, or the idea of this book is going to make me so much money when I release it. It's, what can I do right now in this scene to make me happy? I'm doing this thing. I'm going to work on the dialogue. I'm going to enjoy the craft. I'm going to try to figure out how to make this character pop on the page. And then when I get done with the day, I think, man, I did a great job. I really did make that character pop. That dialogue was so good. It was so sharp. And I find satisfaction and enjoyment in the process of writing and not having written, which is how I used to focus on things. So, gratitude, enjoying the things that you already have and all of the success that you have, celebrating your victories and your wins, and finding ways to be calm and have peace in your everyday moments, because that is your life. If you can do those 3 things, you are going to be infinitely more happy than pursuing the thing that's only going to be 1 or 2 or 3 days out of the year. Focus on the here and now. The second thing is the motivation bubble. If you get tired, learn to rest, not quit. All of you are going to leave here at 20Books. 20Books is awesome. It pumps you up. I have a high every time I leave 20Books, and I'm like, we're going to go to Cincinnati, and we're going to game plan, and I'm going to come up with the most unrealistic, unreasonable plan. when I get done with 20 books, I'm going to write 20 books next year. I'm going to make $10 million. I'm going to sign 5 deals. That's all in my head right now, spinning around. Everyone in this room, probably everyone in this conference is going to have that same thing. We're coming down off the motivation high. And what we do is we create all of these wildly unrealistic goals because we're excited and we're motivated. Motivation is not enough to carry you, especially because of the way that we do it. And that's why I call it the motivation bubble. What we do is it's this big, fragile bubble that exists outside of us. And we put all these motivating ideas in there. I'm going to do this. I'm going to wake up early, 3:30 in the morning, write 20,000 words a week, right? We build this elaborate thing. But then what we don't do is we don't integrate it into our life. Where are you going to get the time to write that extra 20,000 words? Well, you don't think about that. Well, if I'm going to actually do that, I need to find childcare or I need to hire a house. We don't do any of that. We just think about the thing that we want, and it exists externally from our lives. And for a couple weeks, because you haven't actually thought through it, you're fine. But then that bubble starts to rub up against the rough areas of your life, and eventually it pops. And this happens again. I'm going to go back to the gym because I have struggled with the gym my entire life. I hate it. I love it. I need it, but I hate it. That's my relationship with the gym. At the beginning of the year, when I start my New Year's resolution, it's, okay, I'm going to go to the gym. I come up with like a workout plan, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do 5 workouts a week. It's going to be an hour and a half in the gym. I got cardio days. I do all this stuff, right? And for 2 weeks, I kill it. And then my kids get sick, and I can't go to the gym, and I miss a day. And I think, well, I already missed a day, so I might as well just give up and eat a whole pound cake, right? That's what happens to me. I don't know if that happens to you. That's what happens to me. So the motivation bubble rubs up against the rough areas of our life. It pops, and because a lot of us have this all-or-nothing mindset, when we go into things, it immediately derails everything that we've planned. I used to do this too. I used to have very, very aggressive word count goals, and I would think, okay, I need to get 20,000 words a week. That's this many words a day, and then I do good on day 1, and then I do good on day 2, and then I'd miss it on day 3, and then okay, well, I only need to write 7,000 words on day 4 to keep up, and then I'd fall short. And then by the time I got to the end of the week, I think, well, there's no possible way I can hit my weekly word count goal. So again, I should give up and eat a whole pound cake. That's always my solution. It's a funny thing. The thing is, though, we don't do this in other aspects of our life. When I have a bad parenting day, and I find myself thinking, man, I wasn't very nice to my kids, I don't think, well, I should become a hobo and live on a boxcar. That's never the solution. It's, okay, I'll try better. I'll learn from this lesson, and I'll apply it forward. That's what we need to do with our writing. That's what we need to do with the other pieces of our lives. It's better to do anything imperfectly than to do nothing perfectly. And that's what we end up doing when we create these motivation bubbles, is they're unrealistic expectations that are invariably going to fail, and then we're going to blame ourselves, and then we're going to quit. And a lot of people quit. So if you can get away from this all or nothing mindset, and you can recognize that writing 200 words a day maybe isn't as good as writing 2,000 words a day, but it's better than writing 0 words a day, you're going to be in a much better headspace, and you're not going to be constantly beating yourself up that you're not doing enough. So again, perfectly imperfect solutions. You need to figure out how to integrate your aspirations and your goals with your real life. Because until you integrate the things that you want to do, your dreams and your desires and your goals right now, and you actually figure out, well, where is this going to slot into my life? If I want to write 500 more words than I'm writing currently, that's another half hour of time minimum. So where is that half hour coming from? If I want to spend X amount of time on TikTok, because everyone's saying TikTok's awesome, where's that time going to come from? Is it going to come from your writing time? Are you going to wake up early? Are you going to go to bed late? Who's going to watch your kids while you're doing that? You have to think about those things now so that you can actually integrate them holistically into your life, or they will always be these external things that you were trying to do and failing to do, which is immensely frustrating and will eventually lead to exhaustion, cynicism, and lack of accomplishment. So the motivation bubble, we got to get away from it. No all or nothing. Figure out how to imperfectly do things and be okay with that. The other thing, and this is the big one that contributes to cynicism, which I think is the ugliest, nastiest part of burnout, and it's comparatitis. Theodore Roosevelt said, "Comparison is the thief of joy," or maybe it was Michael Scott. I don't know. It's a great quote. Cynicism is one of the most pervasive and painful parts of burnout. It robs the world of color and joy and hopefulness. Again, I have been here many, many times. And a big part of this is the fact that we don't exist in a bubble, not only in our personal lives, but in our communal lives. We don't exist in a bubble. I am wildly successful. I need you all to know, I'm very, very successful. I have a great career. I have lots of deals. I make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I get to roll down my stairs, worm into my office, and see no one for weeks at a time. I could not have a better job or life. There are lots of people that are more successful than me. And if I am not careful, I think, why am I not as successful as Matt? Matt Dinneman's around here someplace. He makes more money than me. So does Dakota Kraut. So does Will White. There's lots of people here that are more successful than me, that make more money than me, that get better deals than me. And it's easy, even though I have all of these wonderful things, to think, well, why not me? Why are they getting that? Are they that much better writers than I am? Why does the audience like them better than they like me? And it doesn't matter where you are, at what stage of the career that you're in, there's always going to be someone who does better than you. Matt and Dakota and Will are exceptionally successful. And you know what? Brandon Sanderson made $42 million on Kickstarter. And J.K. Rowling is a billionaire, right? Everyone else can get wrecked. That's the thing, is it doesn't matter how successful you are, there's always going to be someone more successful than you are. But the thing about career envy is that it's never going to be the full picture. And this is the thing, this is that empathy thing that's going to help you with this comparatitis and this career envy. Is realizing that when you're looking at someone's career, you are only ever looking at a snapshot, the smallest snapshot of that career. You are only ever looking at the peaks. The reality is that every successful author, there are valleys that you have no idea exist. Yes, there are authors that are successful, and you know what? They gave up on their health to get that success. Or they train wrecked their relationships, and they're divorced, and they're unhappy, and they don't see their kids anymore because that's what they had to do to achieve that level of success. All we see is the peak. We see the success, we see the money, we see the accolades. Those are the things that we see without ever recognizing that there's so much more. That's the tip of the iceberg, and there's all of this baggage that goes along with it. And once you realize that no one has the career that they want, and that everyone has sacrificed, everyone has given up things, everyone has made choices that maybe you're not willing to make, it helps you realize that, yeah, okay, maybe I do want their career, but I don't want that career at the expense of my marriage. Or I don't want that career at the expense of my health or the expense of spending time with my kids. And so recognizing that all of those things are necessary things that contribute to success help you start to realize that you can make better priorities and you can make better choices in your life, and that you don't need that, and you can be happy with where you are. And this leads to this third point, the power of gratitude. My wife, Bo-Rat, I can't help it. Every single time I say it, I think of Bo-Rat. My wife started to do a gratitude journal, and she does it every single night. She before she goes to bed, she gets it out and she writes 10 things that she's grateful for from that day. And even on tough days, bad days, where everything has gone wrong, she finds 10 things to be grateful for, and she writes it down, and then she can go back through the year and she can think, man, look at all the things that I have to be grateful for. When you make that a practice and you integrate that practice in your life of being grateful, it helps you to recognize all the good things that you have. And when you start to recognize all the good things you have in your career, even if my career is not as successful as Dakota's, and even if your career is not as successful as mine, that doesn't mean there aren't things to celebrate. There aren't enormous milestones. Finishing a book is a milestone. It doesn't matter that I've written 40, he's written 75, and Kevin J. Anderson's written 150. One book is still hard. That's something to celebrate. That's something to be grateful for. Maybe your book didn't do good. If you can learn lessons from where it failed and you can apply those things forward, that's something to be grateful for. I've had lots of books that have flopped that I thought were the best thing on the planet. I thought, this is the best thing I've ever written in my entire life. Everyone's going to love this. They're going to give me $1 billion. I'm going to overtake J.K. Rowling. I'm going to have my own theme park. And then I launched it, and everyone's like, next, please. We don't like this. Why did you make this thing? Right? That happens. It happens even to very successful authors. It happens to even very successful authors. I'm sorry, you guys you're cracking me up over here. But I learned from those things. I learned from those flops, and I realized, okay, even someone who has had success can still make bad career choices. And if you learn from those things and apply them forward, that's something to be grateful for. Being intentionally grateful also allows you to celebrate the success of others. Again, I'm really good friends with all of these people who, again, a lot of them are more successful than me. And instead of being bitter and thinking, why not me, I celebrate their successes because I can be overjoyed. These are my friends, and good things are happening to my friends. And just because those good things didn't happen to me doesn't mean they won't happen to me, and it doesn't mean that they don't deserve that success too. And so I can celebrate with them. And going through life celebrating everyone's successes is a lot better than going through being bitter and resentful about the success that you did not get. Again, cynicism is the killer that will destroy your career and it will eat out your soul. It is the worst part of burnout. If you can just do this, if you can just recognize that, hey, I may not want that career at this cost, and I am going to be grateful for all of the things that I have and for all of the other things, the wonderful things that are in the life of my friends, you are going to be a much better writer who's going to be able to sustain and do this for longer. So these are the three things you need to stop doing, because these are the three things that directly contribute to the components of burnout that are going to wreck your life if you let them fester. There are also two things that you need to do. The first is you need to treat it like a job. The most important thing about art is to work. Nothing else matters except sitting down every day and trying. Now, there's nothing wrong with writing for pleasure or as a hobby, and if that's you, that's totally fine. That's a totally valid thing. But this probably is not applying to you. You're here at 20Books. You want to make this a career. You want to be a career author. You want to make money from your writing. You want to be able to also roll down your stairs and worm into your office and not see people for weeks at a time. I know, it's the shared vision and the dream that we all have. If you want to do that, the first thing that you need to do, you need to start doing this now, is you need to start carving out space, and you need to start treating it like a job before it is. This is especially true if you are not already a full-time author. The number of full-time authors, so again, we run a publishing company, and a lot of the authors that we bring on, when they go full-time, a funny thing happens. They actually become less productive instead of more productive. And usually that drop in productivity lasts about 6 months because they don't know what to do with it themselves. They think, well, before I only had an hour a day to write, and so I did all my time writing then, but now I have like 9 hours a day, so I can write whenever. So I'll just check emails, and maybe I'll play some Minecraft, and then I'll watch this YouTube video, and I'll write later because I have all the time in the world. And then they get to the end of the day, and they don't have any more time, and they think, oh, man, that's weird. The whole day went by, and they didn't write anything. I'll do it tomorrow. And they think, well, but I should, I want to work out. I don't want to I've been rolling down the stairs. I don't want to get out of shape. I better work out. And they think, well, but I better check those emails. I had a weird email come in, and now I got to do social media. They waste time, and then they don't write. When you have very little time, you have to make the most of it, and so you end up using it well. You need to carve out space, and you need to start forming the habits of treating it like a job before it is, or when it becomes a job, you're not going to have the habits that are going to sustain you long-term through that. And this is the other thing. We were talking about the motivation bubble earlier, right? Carving out space allows you to integrate all of these grand ideas and visions that we all have into our lives in sustainable ways. When you carve out time, you need to treat it like a mama bear, right? Like, this is my time. It is precious. I will maul you and rip your face off if you come mess with my time. Treat it like a job. And this is hard because we work at home, most of us, when we're writing. But if I had a second job working at 7-Eleven, at the night shift 7-Eleven, and someone was like, hey, can you help me move a couch? I'd be like, no, bro, I'm working at 7-Eleven on the night shift, right? Like, that's the way that it works. That's the way you need to treat this. The second thing you need to do is you need to show up and do the work. You need to divorce yourself from the outcome, again, because a release is maybe 3, maybe 4 times a year. Those are 4 days out of the year. You need to divorce yourself from the outcome and just do the work. A funny thing that I have learned by going to writers' conferences is that writers love to talk about writing, they love to talk about publishing, they love to talk about books, they love to talk about all the money they're going to make, they love to talk about what they're going to do when they make the money. The one thing they don't seem to like to do is write. So it's a crazy thing. So you need to show up and you need to do the work. Something that has helped me tremendously is I do writing sprints. I just do half an hour writing sprints. I have a stupid little half hour, like hourglass thing. And when I flip that thing over, I'm writing, man. And it doesn't matter if it's good, it doesn't matter if it's bad. It's not about whether it's good or bad, it's about doing the work. Sometimes, because I struggle with imposter syndrome, and I'll think, man, this is the worst thing I've ever written. And so I'll tell myself, well, that's my goal. My goal is to write the worst possible book that I can. Because there's no way I can write the best book, but I can damn sure write the worst book. And so when I approach it with that mindset that I don't care what the outcome is, and I'm just going to do my job to write the worst possible thing that I can, but I'm going to do the work. During that writing sprint, that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to check Facebook. I'm not going to check Messenger. I'm not going to get on and check my emails. I am going to write. So carve out that space and make your number one priority writing the words. Because more words faster is the single greatest thing that you can do for your career. The other thing is you need that, I've worked in that 9 to 5. The thing about writing and publishing is it is a black hole. It's a black hole that will eat all of the time and all of the energy that you are willing to give it. Because it's never done. Nothing is ever done in writing and publishing. You can always write more words. You can always do more advertising. You can always make more social media posts. You can always find something else to do. And again, because oftentimes we work at home, it blurs the boundaries, and it can be very hard to have these good, healthy priorities. You need to set boundaries now. Back in 2018, I was pushing. I was grinding. I think I put out 8 books that year in 2018, and these are not short books. These are like 100,000 word books. And I had never been more miserable in my entire life. This was right before we went to the first 20Books mastermind in Bali. We were making really good money. I was putting out really, really great content, but I was also extremely unhealthy. I had probably put on 50 or 60 pounds. I was doing overnights like 3 times a week. I was barely ever sleeping. I didn't have any life, any social life. I did nothing to recharge. I only worked. I worked all the time. I worked 80 hours a week. I was miserable. I was angry. I was not a good father. I was not a good husband. Because again, I wanted that success. I saw what everybody else was doing, and I said, I will do anything to get that. And so we went to that Bali mastermind, and we were talking, and I finally had a chance to not work. And Jeanette and I just had this come to Jesus moment where I realized, if I do this, if I keep doing this, I will die, or I will burn out, and I will not be able to do this any longer. And so we had to have this, we need boundaries. And some of the boundaries were, I'm going to exercise at least 3 times a week. I'm going to leave my office and voluntarily move 3 times a week. I am going to sleep normal hours, and I'm not going to pull overnighters. I'm going to stop stocking a refrigerator full of Monster energy drinks, so that drinking so many of them that my heart is going to explode. We built these boundaries. And the funny thing is, I worked less hours in 2019, and I produced 7 books. Because even though I was working less, I was happier, and I was more focused during my work hours, and I was more content in the other parts of my life. And so even though I was working less, the work that I was doing was far more productive. When you establish those boundaries and you say work lives here and life lives here, it makes it easier for you to actually spend the time that you need to make your work productive. Oh, sorry, last thing. Again, establish healthy priorities. Now, I was just talking about, you need these boundary lines. But work-life balance is a joke. It's a thing that doesn't exist. I genuinely do not believe that. The only thing that exists is priorities. You can create priorities in your life, and your priorities can change. The way that I do this is I stack rank things that are important in my life. And really, I only have a couple. I have my health, I have my family, I have my business. These are my priorities. And these priorities can change. There are periods of my time where my work is my number one priority. I was in the Marine Corps. And when I was in the Marine Corps, I actively deployed to combat zones several times. Deployments sucked because they were hard and they were miserable and they were scary and people were shooting at you and you worked all the time and you didn't sleep and it was terrible. Do you know what made deployments manageable in the Marine Corps? They ended, and I knew when they were going to end. So we still have deployment cycles. There are periods in our life where we'll do a 90-day deployment cycle, and I'll say, okay, I'm on a crunch. Deadline's coming up, so for the next 90 days, we're on deployment schedule, and work is the priority. If anything else conflicts with work, work wins. But then it ends, and the priorities shift. And if the priorities are my kids or my family, when my daughter has a soccer game and it conflicts with work, well, work is going to suffer because my daughter and my family is my priority. When health is my priority and I'm on a deadline, well, I'm going to go to the gym, even if I don't really have time to go to the gym because I'm on this deadline, because health is my priority. So by having those priorities and knowing, stack ranking them, saying these are the things that are important to me in this order, when those things conflict, when the motivation bubble rubs up against the rough areas, you know which things are going to win and which things are going to give. So create those priorities. You also need to create short-term and long-term benchmarks called KPIs, key performance indicators. Now, these are things that are measurable goals that you can track and touch base with on a regular basis. So you can create monthly or weekly or even semi-annually KPIs. But it's important that these are real, tangible, measurable goals. Because again, saying, I'm going to write 20 books and make $1 gajillion over the next year, that's not a reasonable, obtainable thing that you can do. But you can say, I want to have a new book out in 120 days from now. What does that actually look like? And then you can set those key performance indicators. You say, okay, well, that looks like 20,000 words, 10,000 words a week. And so that's my goal, is I'm going to hit these 10,000 words. And you can have those check-in points to see how you're doing against your KPI. And when you get there, if you haven't managed to do it, if you failed, then you know that you set an unrealistic and unreasonable expectation for yourself, and you can adjust during your next cycle. But you need manageable, real things that you can track to know whether or not you're executing and staying on track with this plan that you've made for yourself. And again, this last point that I have, set reasonable expectations. A lot of the successful authors that burn out, they set these expectations that they manage to hit. But again, they do it at such an incredible cost that it is not sustainable forever. I would much rather everyone here only write 3 or 4 books a year instead of 7 or 8 or 9 books a year, and to be able to do it for 10 or 20 years, than to be able to write 10 books a year for the next 3 years and then vanish and I'm never going to see you again. Choosing the sustainable option is slower. I will admit that it's slower, but it's also sustainable, and you can do it for a lot longer. I tell every author that we work with that you cannot build a career off of a single book or a single series. This is a long game. This is the pain Olympics. You have to find a way to sustain and refresh your mindset to find joy in the everyday if you're going to do this for more than 5 years. And all of us want to do this for more than 5 years. So set those reasonable expectations. Make sure you have your priorities. Make sure that you establish those hard boundaries. Try to get out of your head and try to find ways to enjoy the everyday minutia of your life. Be grateful for all of the things that we have, for all of the wonderful things that the successes that you've made. Find ways to celebrate your life, because if you don't, I'm telling you, this stuff it's nasty, man. It'll get you. So we have about 2 minutes left. We can ask questions if you have any questions. I know this was like long and depressing. I'm so sorry, but burnout's long and depressing, guys. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah.
Thank you, James. That was fantastic. I remember Jeanette's talk last year was also super memorable on a similar topic. My question is, what are your favorite books or podcasts or resources on this topic?
Not specifically on burnout, but I listen to a podcast that's called The One You Feed, and it's you can find it on Spotify or on Amazon. And they just go over mindfulness. They go over dealing with burnout or different stressors, finding ways to combat addiction or to set healthy priorities, finding ways to habit stack. The One You Feed, an absolutely wonderful podcast that is great, and everyone should listen to it regularly. Yes.
Okay. I have reasonable goals.
Yes.
I have a way to meet them.
Yes.
I have joy in writing.
Yes.
I am editing now. and I think this applies from the laughter. Hey, how many people? Anybody?
Yeah.
So I've tried lots of things. I mean, the most recent thing was writing a short story so I could get back to it. And I did that. And, you know, like you said, life happens. My priority is my partner and my family. And my mom has had issues for 2 years.
Yeah.
So how do I, and I know you don't have the answer, but how do I cut that? How do I find that time when I'm having trouble focusing because...
So a couple of tips. One, understand that even if you do all of this stuff, it's still going to be hard. Indie publishing is a hard business. And when you recognize that, like, yeah, there are going to be parts of it that are just hard and I don't like to do. So set yourself time blocks and do the work, right? I'm gonna do an editing sprint for half an hour, and it doesn't matter that it sucks and I hate it. This is what I do with TikTok, but then it's gonna be over. It's done. And maybe you can only do 2 half-hour editing sprints every single day, and then you work on writing, but then it's done, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. And you showed up, and you did the work, and even though it was hard, you did it, and you're done. The other thing with editing is find one thing that you can try to enjoy the craft. Like, look at a scene and say, hey, how can I make the dialogue in this scene pop? I'm sorry, that's all of our time. For anyone who has other questions, I'll just be out in the hall, and we can hang out and talk. I have literally nothing else to do. I